Christmas was called off, but later I got a notification. My family tagged in a photo. Full dinner, gifts, a fire lit in the fireplace I paid to restore. A day later, my sister asked, "Still covering the January rent?" I said, "Naturally." Then I froze the lease fund and locked their access. By 10 a.m., my parents stood at the door and shouted, "Open the door!" I opened it, laughed, and replied. It hit me like a punch in the stomach. There they were, my entire family, gathered around the long dining table in my parents' house. Warm lighting, full plates, wine glasses, laughter frozen in a perfect moment. My cousin had posted the photo, and I'd been tagged about an hour after midnight. I clicked on it, thinking maybe it was a memory or an old photo. But no, there was the sweater I gave my dad last week, the table runner my mom picked up 2 days ago when I drove her to the store. They were all there except me, and they told me Christmas was canceled. I stared at the screen, numb at first. Then something else started rising, not sadness, fury. I recognized one of the gifts near the tree. It still had the same blue wrapping paper I used, one of the few rolls I had left from years ago, the one I saved for special presents. I had dropped them off 4 days before, thinking they'd still open them, maybe FaceTime me, maybe even thank me. Instead, they placed them under the tree for decoration, posed with them like I was a sponsor, and then cropped me out of their holiday completely. I looked closer. The fireplace was lit, the same one I paid to have repaired last month after it cracked during the first cold snap. My parents couldn't afford the repair. They didn't even ask me, just mentioned the issue on the phone and waited. I covered the bill without question. $642, because they were my parents, because I thought that still meant something. But apparently what it meant was pay up, stay out of the photo. My sister was in the center, arm hooked around our mom, her red dress perfect, makeup glowing. She always looked like she was about to be interviewed, married to some honing finance guy who calls everyone buddy and flies first class, even on 1-hour trips. Ever since that wedding, she became the golden child, the brand ambassador of our family. She shows up twice a year, drops off designer gifts, and suddenly, she's the hero. I show up every weekend, fix their faucet, pay the electric when they accidentally forget, and I'm just expected. 2 months ago, my wife left. We hadn't been perfect, but I didn't expect her to leave, especially not just before my birthday. She said she needed clarity, space, said she was going to take our daughter to Arizona for a while. I didn't stop her. I didn't know what to say. I told my mom that night. She paused, asked if I'd still be coming over to fix their porch light. They never asked how I was doing. Not once. And then they tell me this year they're skipping Christmas, too stressful, too much going on, better to rest. We'll all have our own quiet time. I believed them. I actually believed them. I sat alone on Christmas Eve with cheap takeout, watching a movie I barely registered. I kept waiting for a call or a message, something. Instead, they tagged me in a photo. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my sister. No greeting, no reference to the night before. "Are you still covering their January rent?" That's all she said. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "Of course." I logged into the shared account, canceled the automatic payment, and locked the transfer settings. Then I shut off notifications and waited. At 10 a.m. sharp, there was pounding at my apartment door. I opened it. My parents were there. Dad's face was red, and Mom looked like she hadn't slept. They didn't even say hello. They just started accusing. Why would I do this? Don't I know the rent's due in 2 days? They could lose the house. What kind of son does this? I listened. Just stood there and listened. Then I smiled. "Merry Christmas," I said, and I shut the door. I stood on the other side in silence for a long time, listening to them knock, call my name, curse under their breath, plead. I didn't open it again. I didn't even move. I stood there staring at the wall, and I let it all sink in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't miscommunication. This was who they were, and something in me shifted. I wasn't going to beg for a place at their table anymore. This was going to be the start of something different. 2 days passed before I heard from them again. I got a voicemail from my mom first. She didn't mention the Christmas dinner, the photo, or the fact that they had lied to me, just said they needed to talk, like this was a scheduling issue and not a betrayal. I didn't return the call. Then my dad texted. "We need to sort this out before the 1st. Call me." He didn't say please. He never does. My sister, not a word. I waited. I let them sit in the silence for a day. Then I went over to their house. No warning, no message. I just walked in like I always used to. The keys still worked, even after everything. I half expected them to have changed the locks, but I guess they didn't think I'd show up. It felt surreal standing in the entryway. Same rug, same coat rack I installed, still missing the hook I told Dad I'd fixed 2 months ago. My mom was in the kitchen wiping down a spotless counter. Dad was in the living room pretending to read a magazine, the TV off, the remote sitting untouched on the coffee table. They both looked up, but didn't say anything, not even a fake smile. I sat down at the dining table. No small talk, no greetings. It was Mom who broke the silence. "You can't just freeze the account, Andrew. Rent's due in 3 days. I didn't flinch. I said I saw the photo, that I knew Christmas hadn't been canceled. Only I had. She said it wasn't personal, said they didn't want to upset me given what I'd been going through with my wife, said it wouldn't have been comfortable with everyone there. I asked if it was comfortable using my fireplace, if it was comfortable unwrapping the gifts I bought, if it was comfortable smiling for a photo while I ate noodles alone on Christmas Eve. Neither of them said anything. Then, Dad jumped in. Said I was blowing things out of proportion, that it was just one dinner, that family is more than holidays. That made me laugh. I reminded him how many just one moments I'd swallowed over the years. How many times I covered their bills without a thank you. How many birthdays I spent fixing their house instead of being celebrated. How I handed over money for their rent while I ate ramen 3 nights a week and sold my bed frame to pay my utility bill. They sat there in silence. I told them I wasn't covering anything after January, not rent, not utilities, not a cent. They had 1 more month to figure out how to live without me funding their lifestyle. Mom said something about how it was a bad time to make a change. I asked when it would ever be a good time to stop being treated like a doormat. They didn't answer that either. I stood up and walked to the door. No one followed me. No one said sorry. That night, my sister finally sent a text. Just 5 words. "That was really immature, Andrew." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and went through everything. Our shared phone plan canceled, streaming services I paid for, changed the passwords. The spare key I kept hidden on their porch, gone. The car insurance I'd added them to because their premiums were too high, removed. Bit by bit. I cut the cords. If they wanted to erase me from the family photo, they could live like it. They went quiet for almost 2 weeks. Not a text, not a call, no guilt, no apology, just silence, like they were hoping time would sweep it all under the rug, like maybe I'd forget they had a party without me. Laughed around the table I helped them afford, smiled by the fireplace I paid to fix. Then the sink broke. First came the voicemail from Mom. Said the kitchen was flooding, water everywhere, the pipe under the sink gave out. She used words like disaster and emergency, and slipped in a soft, "We really need you." I didn't call back. A few hours later, Dad sent me a blurry photo of the mess. Towels soaked, cabinet warped, water still dripping. Then he texted, "We can't afford a plumber. Can you come?" I waited 5 minutes and replied, "Understood." The next morning, I drove over, not to fix anything, just to see it with my own eyes. They looked surprised when I walked in. My dad was on his knees trying to tighten something with an old wrench. My mom was red-eyed, probably from the stress, maybe from the humiliation. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen and stared at the water pooling near their feet. "You should call a plumber," I said. Mom looked at me like I just said something cruel. Dad started talking about how plumbers overcharge, how I've always been good with tools, how I know this stuff better than anyone. I asked why they hadn't asked my sister's husband. He was the one who was doing so well, right? The one who got them the fancy espresso machine last year. The one they cleared space for in the kitchen by throwing away the coffee pot I bought them. They didn't respond. Just stood there expecting me to roll up my sleeves. I didn't. I told them the damage wasn't unfixable. Then I pulled out my phone and gave them the name and number of a plumber I trusted. He's good, I said, but he charges what he's worth. Then I left. The next week, it was their taxes. Every year since I turned 25, I did their taxes for free, knew all the deductions, got them the biggest returns they'd ever seen. They always came to me around mid-January like it was automatic. This time, I got a text. "Can you come by this weekend and help with the forms?" I said, "No." Mom tried again. The next day. "We'll pay you," she said. I told her I was busy. That's when the calls to the extended family started. I didn't even have to hear it from my parents. I heard it from my cousin Mike, who called me and said, "Man, your mom says you're going through some stuff." They were painting me as the unstable one now. The emotional wreck, the one punishing his family for no reason. My sister, of course, added her own flavor to the story. Said I'd always been difficult. Said I was jealous of her success. She even told someone I was lashing out because my marriage failed. I didn't defend myself. I let them talk, but I started doing something else. I began visiting again, not for chores, not for bills, just to talk. Every few days, I'd walk in, sit down, and ask one question. "Do you think you did anything wrong?" They never said yes. Sometimes they said I was too sensitive. Other times they acted like I was dredging up old drama. Once my dad actually said, "Life moves on, Andrew. Stop dragging us backward." But every time they refused to take responsibility, every time they twisted it back onto me, it made one thing clearer. They didn't just want me to forgive them. They wanted me to forget. And I couldn't. So I kept showing up calmly, intentionally, asking the same thing, trying to make them see it, but they wouldn't. They looked at me like I was a burden, like I was making things uncomfortable. And somewhere in all of that, something in me started to snap. It happened at the DMV of all places. I was standing in line, half dead from boredom, phone in one hand, paperwork in the other. I was there to update my license. Nothing dramatic, just another chore I'd been putting off. It had been a quiet few weeks. No messages from them, no door knocks, nothing. I actually thought they might have finally understood. Then the email came in. The subject line was, "Rental Account Dispute." It was from the property management company that owned my parents' house. The email said my parents had contacted them, insisting I was legally obligated to cover the rent, that I had been doing so for years, and they were confused as to why the payment had suddenly stopped. The landlord said they were threatening legal action if I didn't resume the payments immediately. They lied to the landlord. They told him I was financially tied to their lease when I'd taken myself off that agreement almost 6 months ago. I did everything right. I made sure nothing connected me to their finances anymore. And now, they were trying to drag me back in through force. I didn't finish at the DMV. I just walked out, got in my car, and sat there with the email open, the bright white screen burning my eyes. Then I drove to their house. No rage, no plan. Just a pit in my stomach and a need to see it through. I walked in without knocking. They were in the living room watching some cooking show. My dad looked up and paused the TV like we were about to have a friendly chat. I held up my phone and read the first line of the email out loud. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom just stared at the screen like she wasn't hearing me. Then she said, "We just needed some time, Andrew. It wasn't meant to scare you." My dad added, "You left us with no choice." "No choice?" That's what he said. I looked at them and realized I wasn't angry anymore, not the way I used to be. I was something else. Empty, drained, like I'd been carrying their weight for so long, I didn't even remember what standing straight felt like until I dropped it. I told them it was over. All of it. That they'd never hear from me again. Not about rent, not about taxes, not about broken sinks or damaged egos. I told them if they ever tried to tie my name to anything again, I'd involve a lawyer. Then I walked out. Then I started shutting everything down. That old Honda they'd been using under my insurance, gone. I sold it within the week. The emergency credit card they used for urgent expenses, canceled. The online grocery account I linked to their address years ago, deleted. The spare key I kept hidden behind their gas meter, tossed into a river. I didn't tell them. I didn't send a warning. I just erased myself from their lives. Then I changed my phone number, blocked them everywhere. It was eerie at first, how quiet my life became. The silence used to feel like loneliness. Now it felt like healing. I started waking up without dread. I had enough money to take care of myself for once. I went back to therapy, got my license updated, got my kitchen fixed, started seeing my daughter again. My wife, after months of silence, said I could come visit. I started living like someone who mattered. And then out of nowhere, my cousin texted me late one night. 2 words. She left. It didn't register at first. I called him. He told me my sister's husband, Mr. Success, the family's savior, was gone. Just packed his things and left. Filed for divorce, drained the shared account, took his name off the deed, and walked. No explanation, no dramatic fight, just one cold, efficient exit. She moved back in with our parents that same week. And suddenly, after months of silence, my phone started ringing again. First came the blocked numbers, then a few from unknown numbers, then a voicemail from Mom. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes, please? Then another. Things have been really hard. Your sister's going through a lot. We all are. I didn't answer. I sat there in my apartment, lights low, the city outside buzzing, and I played the voicemail again. I listened to her voice, the one that used to make me feel 10 years old again. I waited for the usual reaction, the sting, the pressure in my chest, but it didn't come. All I felt was silence, a cold, clear silence. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't waiting for them to change anymore. I was free. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the envelope arrived. Plain white, hand-addressed, no return address. I almost threw it out with the junk mail, but something about it made me pause. Inside was a card, thick, formal, like the kind you'd use for weddings or graduations. It just said, "Family dinner, Sunday, 6 p.m. Please come, Mom." No long explanation, no apology, just that. I stared at it for a while, trying to decide if it was some kind of trap. Maybe they thought, now that my sister was down, I'd be desperate enough to come crawling back. Or maybe they genuinely believed that a roast chicken and awkward smiles could fix 30 years of silence and shadows. I almost didn't go. But curiosity has a way of digging its nails in. And there was still that part of me, buried but alive, that wanted something different. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, just proof that it wasn't all in my head. So I showed up. The house looked the same. Same cracked walkway, same porch light flickering like it always did. My old key still worked. I stepped inside, and everything hit me at once. The smell of Mom's perfume, the faint sound of jazz from the kitchen, the table set with the old dishes I remembered from childhood. Even the candles were lit. They had gone all out. Mom hugged me like nothing had happened. Dad gave me one of those half pats on the back. My sister didn't get up from the couch. She was thinner, pale. Her eyes were hollow. She didn't look like the woman in that Christmas photo. Dinner was tense. They asked about my job, my apartment, my daughter. I gave short answers. No one mentioned the past few months. No one brought up the sink, or the rent, or the emails. It was like they were reading from a script, one where I had always been part of the family and nothing had ever fractured. Then dessert came, and my mom asked me if I remembered that Christmas when I was 10, the one where I cried because my sister got a Game Boy and I didn't. She laughed like it was some charming childhood story. I didn't laugh. Instead, I asked her if she remembered the Christmas 2 years ago, when I drove 6 hours through a snowstorm to bring them groceries because they couldn't afford to shop, and they never even said thank you. The table went silent. I asked if she remembered how many birthdays they forgot, How many times I showed up while my sister just posted photos from Greece or New York or wherever she was that week. No one answered. I turned to my sister and asked her point blank why she hated me so much, what I ever did to make her treat me like a stain on the family. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't. That's when it happened. I broke. Not with rage, not with bitterness, with tears. The kind of tears you don't even know are coming, until they're already falling. I sat there at that perfect little dinner table and cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried for every time they made me feel invisible, for every moment they praised her while I stood in the background, for every quiet night alone after they lied to me, for every word I never got to say as a kid who just wanted to feel loved without having to earn it. And they just sat there, watching. When I finally stopped, my mom reached across the table. She didn't say sorry, just touched my hand. My dad nodded, slow, like he was processing it all for the first time. Even my sister looked away, her eyes glassy. For a second, just one. I thought maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment it would all shift, that we'd finally start something real. But then I saw the dishes, the candles, the effort to stage a perfect evening. And I realized they weren't doing this for me. They were doing it for themselves, to feel like they tried. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just thanked them for the meal and left. As I walked to my car, I felt something strange. Not anger, not relief, closure. By the time June rolled around, I had stopped checking for their names in my inbox. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done, the way a bridge feels after the fire's long gone. It's not burning, it's just ash. My days had fallen into a rhythm that felt like healing. I worked from home, kept things quiet. I flew out to see my daughter every other month. Her laugh had started sounding like mine again, which was something I hadn't realized I missed. Life had narrowed, but in a good way. Everything that stayed in my life had a purpose. Everything else, I let go. Then the message came. It was short, unexpected, from an unknown number. Andrew, we need to talk. Please come by. It's important. Mom, Dad, and Rachel. I stared at it for over an hour. Not because I was weighing whether to respond, but because I didn't feel anything at first. And that scared me. I'd spent years craving an apology, attention, acknowledgement, anything. And now, when it finally came, I wasn't even sure I wanted it. But I went. I parked down the street like I used to when I was angry, back when I'd come over with groceries and leave without a thank you. The house looked smaller somehow. The lawn hadn't been mowed. The mailbox was open. One of the window shutters was hanging sideways like it had been yanked. I let myself in. No one came to the door. The screen creaked like always, but there was no yelling, no movement, just quiet. They were all in the living room. No dinner, no candles, no staging, just 3 worn-out people sitting under the weight of whatever life had become since the center of their universe collapsed. My mom looked older than I remembered. Her hair had gone almost completely gray. My dad looked like he'd stopped caring about what he wore. And my sister, Rachel, looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in months. Pale, makeup smudged, wearing a hoodie that probably used to be mine. I didn't sit. I just stood there and waited. It was my dad who spoke first this time. He said they were sorry for how they handled everything. He didn't use the word wrong. He didn't go into specifics. But he said they hurt me and that they knew it now. My mom picked up from there, said she'd been trying to keep the family together and didn't realize she'd been doing it by making me invisible. Then Rachel stood up. She didn't look at me when she said it. She said she was sorry. Said she resented me because I always showed up and she didn't know how to compete with that when she started making more money and the attention shifted, it felt good to finally be seen, and she didn't want to give that up, even if it meant shutting me out. She said she didn't hate me, that she never did. She just didn't know how to be my sister. And then she said something I wasn't ready for. I don't have anyone else left. The room got very quiet after that. I realized they weren't asking for money or help or even forgiveness. They were asking to not be erased, to be allowed back into my life in some way, however small. I didn't cry this time. I thought I would, but instead I just felt tired. I sat down finally and told them what it felt like all those years, what it felt like to be used, ignored, dismissed, what it felt like to show up for people who would never do the same, what it felt like to be a son and a brother, and still somehow feel like the outsider. And they listened, really listened. We didn't solve anything that night. There were no grand reunions, no hugs that healed it all, but there was honesty. And for us, that was new. I left after an hour. As I walked down the front steps, Rachel followed me out. She didn't say anything at first. Then she asked if I'd ever want to come over for dinner again. Just the four of us. No guests, no performance, just dinner. I said maybe, and I meant it. I got in my car and pulled away, not feeling lighter or heavier, just open, like the door wasn't locked anymore, like maybe it could swing both ways now. And for the first time since I was a kid, I didn't feel like I was knocking from the outside. It's been almost a year since that night. We've had 3 dinners since then. No speeches, no drama, just food, some awkward pauses, and moments that almost feel like warmth. My dad started texting me occasionally. Articles, jokes, random updates. My mom sends pictures of meals she makes, like she's trying to keep a thread between us alive. And Rachel, she's different now, quieter, but not cold. Sometimes we talk for 20 minutes, sometimes we don't say much at all. I don't trust them completely. I don't forget easily, but I don't flinch anymore when their names show up on my phone. Last week, I hosted dinner at my apartment, just me and my daughter. I made spaghetti and burned the garlic bread, and we laughed about it like it was a running joke. When she asked why there were 4 seats at the table, I didn't answer right away. Then I said, just in case. And for once, I meant it without resentment. Just hope.